Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We're back with our second hour of All In. It's a holiday weekend. It's Memorial Day. A lot of people observing that today. It's not just for us, but for Congress, too. Remember last week, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson cut his members loose early for the weekend without voting on their own budget reconciliation bill. John Thune sent them hope in the Senate. That's where the reconciliation bill was going to move first. It's a move that they both took to avoid having to grapple with the anger in both parties over Donald Trump's unprecedented seditionist slush fund. Being away from Washington does not mean the controversy's gone away. Congressman Jamie Raskin, a Democrat, and Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican, have both filed bills to block Trump's $1.8 billion slush fund. Democrats have also filed to block the slush fund with the federal court overseeing Trump's lawsuit. Lawsuits against the fund have already been filed by other public interest groups, Capitol Metropolitan Police officers, a fired January 6th prosecutor, other people targeted by the Trump DOJ. Democrats have vowed that when the House returns to vote on that reconciliation bill in the Senate, right, that they're going to have an opportunity, because of the way reconciliation works, to force votes on a slew of amendments to block the slush fund, including things like, imagine this, an amendment to make sure none of the money in the fund can go to people convicted of, say, child sexual assault, right? Do you want to vote on that if you're a Republican? Do you want to vote no on that? All in an attempt to force Republicans to have to take a position on this. Pick a side, Trump or the American taxpayer. No one's entirely sure how those votes would shake out yet. On Sunday, Republican Senator Tom Tillis, who previously called the Trump slush fund stupid on stilts, suggested the Trump DOJ could have trouble getting the funding it wants if it allows the president's insurrectionist giveaway to proceed.
There's no way that we're going to be in a position to fund $1.5 billion for an anti-fraud division when we've got this bogus 1776. I called it a payout pot for punks. You just can't have those two equivalent numbers at the same time. It makes no sense. So it's politically tone deaf. Whoever did it should be fired. Let's figure out a way to help people who are victims of warfare, but not people who are convicted by a jury of their peers or pled guilty to assaulting a police officer. Please.
Norm Eisen served as an ethics lawyer in the Obama White House and co-founded Democracy Defenders Action, which is fighting Trump's slush fund in federal court. Lisa Rubin, of course, MS Now senior legal reporter who's been following this. They both join me now. Lisa, let me start with you. I think what Tom Tillis meant to say there was victims not of warfare, but of lawfare, which is the term they like to use in the right, where they have a sort of story they tell about lawfare, the weaponization of the law against people that were Donald Trump. Now, a lot of this actually happened under Departments of Justice that were controlled by Donald Trump and Republican Attorney General. But the thing that occurs to me as I watch all of this, right, play out is that you can sue if you're a Jan 6er and you feel you got bum treatment, you can sue the government. Like, the fact is, it's probably not going to do that well. So this idea that, like, oh, well, there's no recourse to these people. There's all the recourse that any of us have in civil litigation. Knock yourself out. File some suits. Go to town.
That's absolutely true. And by the way, that same recourse was available to then citizen Trump in between his two terms of office. How do I know that? Because the guy filed 2 administrative claims under what's called the Federal Tort Claims Act. Those were the 2 pending claims having to do with the Mar-a-Lago search. That is part and parcel of this same settlement.
Senator Bernie Sanders is an independent Vermont. He caucuses with the Democrats. Graham Plattner is Democratic candidate for the Senate from Maine. They have been out together as part of the Fighting Oligarchy Tour. They have an event tonight after our show. It's good to see you both, gentlemen. Mr. Plattner, let me just start with you. Today, of course, is Memorial Day. People are observing. There's people barbecuing, and there's people commemorating folks and thinking about what this day means. And obviously, someone who's served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, someone who's spoken incredibly movingly, I have to say, just personally, very movingly about your experience of that, of being in those wars, just how you're feeling and what you're thinking about today on this Memorial Day.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, Chris. And this morning, actually, Senator Sanders was gracious enough to honor the town of Sullivan, Maine, which is my hometown, to join us at our Memorial Day event. Memorial Day is always a complicated day, I think, for those of us who saw a lot of combat. It's a day where we want to remember, and we need to not forget those who made the ultimate sacrifice. But as you mentioned, it's also a day which a lot of people in our society treat as like a holiday. And that's always a little complicated, I think, for those of us who remember our friends who we lost. It's also, quite frankly, at this day and age, a reminder that the best way for us to honor those who have sacrificed for this country is to not create more opportunities for government to waste people's lives like we are seeing in the war in Iran. I very much believe that we need to take moments like today and realize that we have a resource in this country, and the young men and women who are willing to serve it, and it cannot be squandered lightly. And I very much believe that we need to build a politics in the future that takes it seriously enough to not start wars like Iraq or Afghanistan or what's happening in Iran, and realize that the best respect that we can show is by only using it in times when absolutely necessary.
Senator, you've spent a lot of time on the Veterans Committee in the United States Senate, and veteran services and healthcare has been an issue that has been very, very front and center for your career in the legislature, both in the House and the Senate. Your thoughts, particularly as we get some news that maybe or maybe there isn't a deal to end the kind of frozen conflict with Iran right now?
Well, certainly, I hope that there will be. The problem is we have a president who lies all of the time, and it's hard to know what is true and what is not true. But, you know, going back to what Graham just said, I am thinking about my generation, where we experienced the war in Vietnam. 59,000 plus young men died. Many more died after they came home on the streets, with drug addiction and et cetera. And that was a war based on a lie, as was the war in Iraq. And we need a foreign policy which is designed to improve life for people all over the world, to do our best to make sure that we do not have these never-ending wars that we're now seeing in Iran, and which honors and respects the men and women who are prepared to sacrifice their lives to make sure that they do not have to put their lives on the line in wars that should not be fought.
The title for the event, the tour, Senator Sanders, that you've been on, called a Fighting Oligarchy Tour. This is one of those stops. I think one of the people I think that you would consider an oligarch, and I think probably fits the textbook definition, would be Jeff Bezos. Of course, you know, one or two richest men in the world, depending on what the stock is doing that day. And there's been an interesting debate that's opened up about taxes, about tax fairness. Particularly different Democrats have had different proposals about tax fairness. And I want to play something he said about his own tax verdict and get your response, Mr. Plattner, and yours, Senator Sanders. This is what he had to say about the idea of doubling his taxes and that it wouldn't really help very much. Take a listen.
If people want me to pay more billions,
right,
then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, you know, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you.
Mr. Plattner, what do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's abject nonsense. I think that's what somebody says when they don't want to see their taxes go up. There's absolutely no question that if we target the wealth where it has been hoarded, frankly, for decades at this point, and we pull it back into our system and put it into social programs like healthcare, like childcare, like paying teachers what they are worth, we will absolutely improve the lives of working Americans and, quite frankly, improve our society as a whole. It's, I think what he is pitching is propaganda. It's meant to protect himself and protect his crony friends. And we're going to come after them for it.
Senator, he also pivoted to an idea of like cutting taxes. No one in the bottom 50% would pay any taxes. There's been a lot of Democrats, interestingly, proposing things along that line, big exemptions at the bottom. I think Senator Booker has a version, Senator Van Hollen. People, I think, who talk about this progressive. Congresswoman AOC has come out against it, saying, look, the best way that we build a kind of society and tax system that works for all is that everyone's paying in and everyone's benefiting, more like what we see around Social Security, Medicare, more what we see in Europe. Where are you on that?
Well, what I know is that today we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of this country, much worse than the so-called Gilded Age. And I know that at a time when the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%, when people like Bezos and Musk own more wealth than, you know, so many Americans combined. Musk himself owns more wealth than the bottom 53% of American households. Meanwhile, the effective tax rate of billionaires is lower than that of a nurse or a truck driver. So, of course, we need to demand that the wealthiest people in this country, the billionaire class, start paying their fair share of taxes, which is why I've introduced legislation calling for a 5% annual tax on the wealth of billionaires. That's less than 1,000 Americans. And, Chris, if we do that, we raise enough revenue to provide a $3,000 check for every man, woman, and child in families under 150,000. We can make sure that everybody who was thrown off of health care by Trump gets reinstated. And we can do enormous things for the American people. The point is, there is so much inequality right now that taxes on billionaires can transform life for the working class of this country, which is right now struggling to pay the bills.
Mr. Plattner, you're trying to make the case to the folks in your home state of Maine to vote out a 5-term incumbent, someone who's been a real, I think it's fair to say, an institution in Maine life, and comes from a sort of political family and has been there for a very long time, probably has name recognition north of 99%, I think it's fair to say, in Maine, who has beaten back other challenges. Why do you think, what is different this time? What is the case for why Mainers should turn away from someone who has been such an institution in that state through Democratic and Republican institutions?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, because as an institution, she has overseen the deterioration of material conditions for working people in this state.
Donald Trump may have accidentally done something Democrats couldn't do for themselves. He forced them to adapt, because after the disaster of 2024, Democrats seem to have finally realized something painfully obvious. You cannot win national elections by talking only to people who already agree with you. And now they're changing. Meanwhile, Republicans, they're moving in the exact opposite direction, deeper into the cult. That's the real story here. Democrats are expanding the tent. Republicans are shrinking it. Look at what Democrats are doing right now. They're experimenting. They're recruiting different kinds of candidates for different states. Moderates in some places, progressives in others, independents where necessary, not perfect candidates, not ideological purity tests. Candidates who actually fit the voters they're trying to win. That's politics. Meanwhile, Trump has learned absolutely nothing. Nothing. If anything, he seems even more consumed by grievance, ego, and revenge than before. Every criticism becomes a loyalty test. Every disagreement becomes betrayal. Every Republican who steps out of line becomes an enemy. And eventually that destroys parties from the inside. You're already seeing the cracks. Republican senators publicly fighting with Trump. House Republicans openly frustrated. Former MAGA diehards turning critical. Even some of Trump's loudest defenders are starting to distance themselves from the chaos, because movements built entirely around one man eventually collapse under the weight of that man's insecurities. That's what's happening now. The GOP used to at least pretend to be a coalition: conservatives, libertarians, hawks, evangelicals, business Republicans. Now, it's just loyalty to Trump. And if you're not loyal enough, you get pushed out. That's why Republicans keep nominating candidates who fire up the MAGA base but struggle everywhere else. We already saw this movie with Herschel Walker, Carrie Lake, Mehmet Oz, candidates selected less for competence and more for personal loyalty to Trump. And Democrats are watching that happen and adjusting accordingly. Look at Nebraska. Democrats are practically stepping aside to support Dan Osborne, an independent with crossover appeal, because they understand something Republicans no longer do. Winning matters more than ideological purity. That's a huge shift. And honestly, smart politics, because broad coalitions win elections. Cults don't. Ronald Reagan understood that. Barack Obama understood that. Even Bill Clinton understood that with the whole big tent strategy in the 1990s. Trump doesn't understand it because Trump doesn't actually build coalitions. He builds personal followings. And personal followings are fragile. The second people stop fearing the leader, the whole structure starts cracking. That's why Republicans are becoming more insular, more extreme, more paranoid. Every election loss pushes them further inward instead of outward. They're not asking, how do we grow? They're asking, who do we purge next? And that is how political movements die. Not all at once, but slowly, angrily, collapsing inward while convincing themselves they're stronger than ever.